My name is Elaine Matthews, and I'm 68. I've lived most of my life pouring my heart into my home. The home my husband and I built from scratch, brick by brick, nail by nail, dreaming of a space where our family could grow and love could flourish. That morning, standing in my kitchen with the sunlight spilling across the pale yellow walls, I felt a chill run down my spine, because something I never expected had happened. My son, Michael, the boy I had raised with so much care, was staring at me with a look I barely recognized, angry, distant, almost like a stranger, and then the words cut through the air, slicing through the warmth of the morning, telling me I couldn't argue with his wife in her house. Her house. The words echoed inside me, twisting everything I thought I knew about my family, my home, and my place in both. In that instant, I froze, the dish towel in my hand slipping slightly, my chest tightening with disbelief. This was my home. Every corner held years of memories, love, and sacrifice. I could see the echoes of birthdays celebrated, the scent of cinnamon rolls from Sunday mornings, and the laughter of two small boys running barefoot across the hardwood floor. And now, it felt alien. The walls, once comforting, seemed to shrink around me. I remember looking past Michael to Rachel, my daughter-in-law, standing behind him with a quiet satisfaction in her posture. I understood, almost painfully, what her expression meant. She had managed to shift my own son's loyalty without a single raised voice. All this over something so small, garden pots moved without asking. The soft reminder that some spaces and memories hold deeper meaning than decor. I had tried to be gentle, reminding myself that she wanted to feel comfortable. I told myself I could be patient. But in that moment, watching the boy I loved become a man who didn't see me as his mother but as an obstacle, I felt a weight settle deep in my chest, heavier than any kitchen counter or dish I had ever held. My knees trembled, not with anger, but with hurt. The kind that lingers longer than any shouting match could ever inflict. And as I stood there in my own home, I realized this day was not just about a few rearranged plants. It was about my place, my dignity, and whether a lifetime of love and sacrifice could still matter. For a long moment, I simply breathed, letting the shock settle, knowing that the story of this home, my home, I was about to take a turn I had never anticipated. From here, I knew I had to decide what standing firm would truly mean, and what I was willing to risk for the respect I had always given freely. This naturally leads into Part 2 backstory, Elaine's sacrifices, where the audience will understand the depth of Elaine's life, struggles, and emotional stakes. I've always believed a home is more than walls and a roof. It's the story of a family, written in everyday moments, laughter, and quiet sacrifice. My husband, Harvey, and I bought our first patch of land over 35 years ago. It was nothing more than a rocky plot with weeds growing wild. But Harvey saw potential where others only saw dirt. I believed in him because he was a man who kept his word. I remember those early years living in a tiny trailer, cooking on a gas stove while he worked long days in construction, bringing home leftover materials on weekends. Together, we built a house wall by wall, nail by nail, sometimes bleeding from the work, sometimes laughing through the exhaustion. Every ache in my hands felt like progress. Every drop of sweat a promise that we were shaping not just a house, but a life. When our first son, Michael, was born, the joy was overwhelming. He had Harvey's calm smile and eyes that seemed to hold the world's hope. A few years later, Adam arrived, and suddenly our little world was alive with muddy shoes, laughter echoing through empty rooms, and spilled milk on the kitchen floor. Those years were a mixture of chaos and contentment, a rhythm I cherished more than any luxury. But life has a way of testing even the strongest foundations. Harvey died in a construction accident when our boys were still young. I remember the day vividly. The hard hat they brought to me felt like the weight of the world in my arms. I could have crumbled, given into despair. But I looked into the frightened eyes of my sons and knew I had to keep going. I sold what I could. Worked double shifts as a housekeeper and seamstress. Baked pies to sell at the Sunday market. Sometimes going to bed hungry so my boys could eat. Every night, I reminded myself that the dream Harvey had started was not gone, it just needed me to carry it forward. Years later, the house finally stood proud. 2 stories tall with a porch wrapped in white railings. I still remember painting the walls pale yellow. Harvey's favorite color. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. Every brick held a story. Every corner, a memory of sacrifice, resilience, and love. When Michael graduated from college, I looked at the house and felt the quiet pride of a life built with intention. A legacy meant to shelter and nurture. Now, standing in that same kitchen decades later, hearing the words from my own son that made it feel like I was no longer welcome, I realized just how fragile the perception of home can be. Years of sweat, love, and quiet endurance seemed to vanish in a single sentence. It hurt. Deeply. Not because the words were loud, but because they made me see a truth I had never imagined sometimes. The ones you raise with all your heart can become strangers to the values you hold most dear. I take a deep breath and feel the weight of those memories pressing against me. This home, once a sanctuary of love and resilience, now feels like a battlefield where respect and understanding must be reclaimed. And in that quiet, I begin to understand that the story isn't over, it's only moving toward its next chapter. One that will demand courage, patience, and the kind of strength that comes from decades of surviving life's harshest storms. From here, I know I must confront not just the immediate conflict, but the challenge of asserting the dignity and love that this home represents. The question becomes, how do you protect everything you've poured your soul into, when the people you love seem determined to tear it apart? That question will guide the next steps. This naturally leads into Part 3, conflict escalation with daughter-in-law, where the audience will see the tension grow. Small provocations turning into a breaking point. After all those years of building a life and raising my sons, I never imagined that the greatest challenge would come not from the world outside, but from inside my own home. It started with small changes, subtle, almost polite, but each one chipped away at the sense of ownership and belonging I had always felt. The first time Rachel moved my garden pots without asking, I remember feeling a flicker of irritation. But I told myself to be patient, reminded that she wanted to feel at home too. Over time, the small intrusions grew. Curtains replaced. Family photos tucked away in drawers. Kitchen utensils rearranged. Each act felt like a quiet message. This house was hers as much as mine. And my presence mattered less than I believed. I tried to reason with myself, thinking it was just about comfort, about blending our lives together. But as I watched my sons remain silent, or even support her decisions, the hurt settled deeper. Michael, the boy I had taught to be kind, respectful, and loyal, no longer seemed to see the years of care and sacrifice that had built this home. He was torn between loyalty to his wife and the mother who had raised him. I can still feel the tightening in my chest when I realized that he had chosen her side, that my voice had been silenced in the very place I had poured my heart into. It wasn't about the pots or the curtains, it was about respect, about acknowledgement, about the invisible line that had been crossed. And every time I tried to speak up, to gently remind them of the years and memories that anchored this house, I was met with polite dismissal, a reminder that their comfort came first. It was a slow accumulation of moments, each one small enough to dismiss, but together forming a wave of isolation and doubt. The laughter that once echoed through the halls, the smells of Sunday mornings, the quiet presence of a family, sharing life together, all of it began to fade. I started noticing the subtle ways Michael deferred to Rachel. The way he avoided making eye contact when I expressed concern. The way the house seemed to belong to everyone else but me. At night, I would sit alone in my living room, tracing my fingers along the walls I had painted, the counters I had scrubbed until my hands were raw. And I wondered how love could turn into this, how care and patience could be mistaken for weakness, how a lifetime of devotion could be overlooked. The sadness was heavy, but beneath it simmered a quiet resolve. I knew that if I didn't act, I would lose not only the house, but my dignity, and perhaps the respect of my sons forever. It was in that moment, in the silence that followed another small injustice, that I realized the stakes had changed. This wasn't a matter of being polite or patient anymore. It was about protecting a lifetime of love, labor, and family legacy. And I began to understand that the path forward would require courage, clarity, and a willingness to confront the pain directly. The house I had built, the memories embedded in every corner, could no longer be taken for granted. I could feel the tension building inside me, a mix of sadness, frustration, and quiet determination. I knew that soon, the moment would come when I had to act decisively, and when it did, nothing in that kitchen, nothing in those years of careful compromise, would prepare them for the choice I was about to make. This naturally leads into Part 4 climax. Elaine reclaims her home, where the tension reaches its peak, and Elaine takes decisive action to restore her dignity and authority. I spent the night thinking about every small moment that had led to this breaking point, the photos tucked away, the pots moved without asking, Michael's silence when I tried to speak. By morning, I felt a strange calm settle over me, a quiet certainty that the only way to protect myself and the home I had built was to take action. It wasn't anger driving me, it was the need to reclaim my dignity, to show that love without respect isn't enough. I called the locksmith and watched him arrive mid-morning, his hands steady and practiced as he listened to my story. I could see the understanding in his eyes, the kind of respect that comes from years of seeing people's lives turn upside down. As the locks were changed, I felt the weight of years of silence and compromise begin to lift, replaced by a sense of clarity and purpose. For the first time in months, I felt in control, not of others, but of myself and the space that had always been mine. When Michael and Rachel returned home, I could hear their confusion and frustration before they even reached the front door. Their voices rattled against the entryway, sharp and demanding. But I remained silent, standing tall in my kitchen as though I had been waiting for this moment my entire life. I could feel their disbelief, their sense that I had overstepped. Yet I knew in my heart that I had finally acted in alignment with everything I had stood for all these years. There was no yelling, no confrontation. I simply let the silence speak. I let them feel what it meant to be excluded, to realize that respect could not be assumed, that it had to be earned through consideration and decency. Watching them struggle with the door, I felt a mix of pity and resolve. I wasn't punishing them for cruelty. I was protecting the essence of my home and my spirit. Sitting alone that night, I reflected on everything that had brought me here, the decades of hard work, the moments of joy and grief, the sacrifices made silently for my sons' futures. I realized that standing firm was not an act of vengeance but an act of self-respect. Love, I learned, can be patient, gentle, and forgiving, but it must never erase the boundaries that define who we are. Over the next few days, the tension in the house remained, but I could feel a subtle shift. My sons and Rachel began to confront their own choices, the ways they had dismissed the years of care and effort that had shaped the home they now inhabited. And while the silence was heavy, it was no longer empty. It was a space where reflection could begin, where lessons about respect and accountability could settle in quietly. without force or bitterness. As I moved through the kitchen, touching the counters and shelves I had tended for decades, I felt a renewed connection to my own life, my own story. Every corner, every brick, every faded photograph held meaning. Beyond decoration, it held memory, resilience, and the quiet power of someone who refused to be erased. And in that calm, I knew that the house was no longer just a physical space. It had become a testament to strength, patience, and the importance of standing firm when everything else seems to crumble. I also realized that this moment was a turning point, not just for me, but for them. Respect and understanding couldn't be demanded, they had to be felt, realized, and chosen. And by taking this step, I had created the conditions for that realization to take root. It was the first true victory, not of confrontation, but of integrity. And so I waited, quietly, knowing that when the moment came for reconciliation, it would be genuine and lasting. The home, the sanctuary I had fought to protect, had regained its voice. And I, finally, had regained mine. This naturally leads into Part 5, Reconciliation and Emotional Resolution, where Rachel and Michael begin to understand the consequences of their choices, and the family starts to rebuild trust and respect. The days following the lockout were quiet, almost eerily so. The absence of their voices in the hallways, the clatter of dishes, the hurried steps of young feet, it was strange at first. Like the house was holding its breath along with me. But in that quiet, I began to notice something shifting. Subtle but undeniable. Michael's exhaustion and Rachel's anxiety were visible. Even through their attempts to appear unaffected, they had been forced, in a way, to confront the choices they had made, the dismissals, the thoughtless changes, the way my feelings had been ignored. When Rachel finally reached out, I could sense a hesitation in her voice, a vulnerability that I had never heard before. She acknowledged the wrongs, admitted that she had acted as though she owned everything without consideration, and confessed that she had put Michael in a position that was unfair and painful. Hearing her express remorse without excuses was like feeling the first drop of rain after a long drought. It didn't erase the past, but it offered a path forward. Michael, too, began to open up, not through words at first, but through gestures and small moments of care that reminded me of the boy I had raised, the one who once looked to me for guidance and example. His apology came quietly, infused with regret and recognition of the pain he had caused. I felt the weight of relief mixed with lingering sadness for the trust that had been strained. Together, we started rebuilding, not by returning to the old patterns, but by establishing new boundaries grounded in respect. Rachel asked before moving anything, involved me in household decisions, and began sharing stories from her past that revealed a vulnerability I hadn't seen before. Michael listened, sometimes silently, letting me know through presence rather than insistence that he had learned to balance loyalty to both his wife and his mother. It was in these small, sincere interactions that I began to feel the house come alive again, not with control or compliance, but with mutual understanding. Laughter returned, quiet at first, then gradually growing, filling the spaces that had felt empty and tense. Watching Rachel help with the dishes, Michael tending the garden alongside me, I realized that forgiveness isn't a single moment. It's a choice we make repeatedly, day by day, through patience, honesty, and willingness to see the good intentions beneath the mistakes. Sitting on the porch one evening with the sun dipping behind the trees Harvey once planted, I felt a calm pride. This home, our home, had endured conflict, disrespect, and the strain of divided loyalties. Yet it had emerged intact. And I had endured too, not by bending, but by standing firm, by refusing to let my life, my love, or my home be dismissed. In that moment, I understood that true reconciliation is not about who is right or wrong. It is about acknowledging mistakes, showing humility, and taking deliberate steps to repair what has been strained. And as I breathed in the warm evening air, I knew that the lessons learned here would ripple through our family for years to come, shaping relationships in ways far deeper than any argument or misunderstanding ever could. This naturally leads into Part 6, Reflection and Takeaways, where the audience will hear Elaine's final thoughts, life lessons, and heartfelt advice on boundaries, respect, and maintaining dignity in family relationships. Sitting on the porch that evening, watching the last rays of sun stretch across the garden Harvey planted, I felt a quiet sense of completion. The house looked the same: pale yellow walls, white railings, familiar corners, but the air inside had shifted. It was softer now, warmer. Laughter had returned, not forced or hurried, but gentle, patient, the kind that grows naturally when respect and understanding are present. I realized then that the battles I had fought weren't just about furniture, photos, or garden pots. They were about teaching my family the value of boundaries, the importance of respect, and the courage to stand firm when what matters most is threatened. I reflected on what this experience had taught me. Love without respect can become exhausting and one-sided. Kindness without boundaries can be mistaken for weakness. And yet, standing firm doesn't mean holding grudges or acting out of anger. It means acknowledging the years of effort, sacrifice, and care that form the foundation of your life, and making sure that those who enter your world understand and honor that foundation. I understood that forgiveness is not instantaneous. It is earned through consistent actions, sincerity, and willingness to change. As I watched Rachel water the roses alongside Michael, I noticed the quiet transformation in them both. Their gestures of care and thoughtfulness were not just apologies, they were signs that lessons had been learned. That respect was now being actively chosen, rather than assumed. Seeing them work together reminded me that reconciliation doesn't erase mistakes, but it does open the door to growth, understanding, and deeper connection. I wanted anyone listening to this story to know that no matter how difficult the situation may feel, or how impossible it may seem to protect your dignity, there is strength in standing firm. There is power in patience, in refusing to be erased or dismissed. Life will test your boundaries, your values, and your love, but the courage to act with integrity will always lead to a deeper sense of peace. And so, if my story touches you, I hope it encourages you to reflect on your own relationships. Consider where respect has been lost or overlooked, and where you might gently but firmly reclaim your place, not with anger, but with quiet confidence and clear boundaries. Your life, your home, and your peace are worth protecting. If this story resonates, take a moment to share it. Leave a comment about what you would have done in my place. And remember that the truest victories in life often come from preserving your dignity while nurturing love.